Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Doyle Heffley of the 122nd District in Carbon County. Pennsylvania's Uniform Construction Code was implemented in 2004 with the goal of bringing a set of common standards to residential and commercial construction across the state. More than a decade later, enough time has passed to fairly judge how the law has worked. Joining me today to review the law and discuss my legislation that calls for changes is Bruce Hanson, Director of the House Research Department. Bruce, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. You've been working on the L&I committee for over 15 years.
Correct.
As I understand, you were involved in this from the beginning.
Right. Well, prior to 1999, there wasn't a statewide building code. In 1999, the legislature, after about 10 years of trying to put together a comprehensive bill on it, passed the Bill Act 45, became the Pennsylvania Construction Code Act. That basically required that the Department of Labor and Industry promulgate regulations to implement a statewide building code. Those regulations were promulgated and the effective date was April 2004. So since April 2004, we've had this statewide building code. So.
Yeah. And those codes, as we can see by the
yes,
code
Doyle, I
book
brought this
here.
along. This is an example of one of the family of codes that are promulgated by the International Codes Council. This is the International Residential Code, which deals with residential homes. And as we can see here, it's pretty complex, a lot of technical standards in it. And this is basically what code officials are tasked with enforcing when it comes to a residential home.
Yeah. And obviously the codes were put in place for the reason of public safety, making sure that if somebody's going to be buying a home or building a home, is going to be built to a certain standard.
Correct.
Now, since that law has been implemented, we have made some changes. A few years back, there was a huge uproar over a sprinkler mandate in residential dwellings, and the legislature tweaked that language a little bit to allow for some
Correct.
changes in how those codes were adopted. Recently, it's come to my attention after speaking with a lot of folks, both in the district that I represent, the 122nd District, Carbon County, and the surrounding area, as well as across the state, that there seems to be some issues yet with the code and how the municipalities can opt in or opt out and select those code enforcement officers. So my understanding, to be a UCC code enforcement officer, you have to be licensed.
We have to be certified by the Department of Labor and Industry. Correct.
Okay. And obviously, so you're meeting those standards of being certified. Now, can those UCC code officials then operate anywhere across the state?
Yes, they can be. Once they receive their certification, whatever territory they can cover and wherever they're authorized to operate, they can operate.
Yeah, and so the municipalities then would have the choice to either opt in or opt out of the code enforcement.
Yeah, the Uniform Construction Code, our statewide building code, there's 2,562 municipalities in Pennsylvania. 90% of those municipalities chose to what they call opt in to enforce the UCC. So they basically wanted to administer the program themselves. A lot of those opt-in municipalities have their own codes program, like Wilkes-Barre, Harrisburg. They have their own indigenous personnel actually enforcing the code.
So that would be a municipal employee.
Philadelphia,
right?
A municipal employee.
Yeah.
They have their own program, and then the other municipalities that opted in don't have their own program, so they chose to hire basically a private company, a third-party agency, to enforce the code.
So if those municipalities that opted in at 90%, and they said we're going to hire our own third party, it would be about 60% of that 90 hired a third-party inspector. Now they have the option; they can choose one or more third-party inspectors.
Right.
Correct.
So there's of the about 1,400 municipalities that have chosen to use third-party agencies. Most of them have opted to just use one, basically a monopoly. But they can use two or more, and there are places in the state where a person can go to they can choose. So, but for the most part, there is a large number of municipalities that have just one, quote unquote, like almost a monopoly.
Yeah. And that, I guess, and that's the heart of the legislation that we're proposing, that I'm proposing, just to introduce. House Bill 782 would address some of the concerns that I've received from those commercial developers, of small business owners trying to open up a hair salon or a dental office, as well as residential builders, contractors, and just folks that are building their first home.
Right.
And I think where the conflict comes in is when you have that one or more, and you give that option, the municipalities just opt in to hire one UCC inspector, we are giving an incredible amount of power and authority
it's like
to
taxes.
one. Yeah, essentially it's a tax, and it's a mandate. It's a mandate on those small businesses, and a mandate on those people those folks that are finally building their home, the American dream home ownership. Now, how that would work is, my understanding, and how to address it would be the UCC office, the third-party inspector contracts then with that municipality, and they have the exclusive right. So if you're building something, you then have to contact that inspector to come out and do the inspection.
What happens now is if a municipality, that governing board, decides they just want to have one, they've chosen to do that, they don't have to competitively bid it. It's a professional service, and under our state law, they're allowed to select pretty much who they choose to do it. So right now, there's no even requirement for competitive bidding for the third-party agency. So they can select who they want. That third-party agency now has the sole rights to enforce the UCC in that municipality. So if you're building a home or you're putting on a deck and it's subject to the code, you have to contact them, get a permit, rely on their inspectors to come out and inspect in a timely manner. They set the fee schedule. The municipality does have some control of the fee schedule, but the TPA does have control over their own fees, so they do have an immense amount of power over a homeowner.
Yeah,
let's talk about a homeowner here.
Yeah.
There's an immense amount of power, because if they choose not to approve an inspection, there's not much you can do. You pretty much have to, you don't really have an appeal right to the state right now. So if an inspector, you have a disagreement with an inspector, and I think we were talking about this previously, is there's not really much redress you have.
Yeah, and that's some of the concern and the complaints that we've gotten to our office. We have folks that are trying to do both residential and commercial, small projects, small development, maybe less than $50,000 or $10,000, and they're trying to get these projects done in a timely manner. A lot of times, if they're contacting that one third-party inspector, and sometimes these third-party inspectors only have 1 or 2 employees, they're waiting a long time to get those inspections done. For example, if you're pouring concrete, you have a window when that inspector needs to be there to look at the work before the concrete's poured. So if you have a whole crew there in the morning ready to pour concrete, the inspector decides he's just not going to show up. You have no recourse, because
or they can't show up. He was sick. Here's another thing too: is there's times where the code official, they're acting in good faith. It's just somebody's sick that day or for a week, and they lose that inspector. And I've heard stories where the footings weren't inspected, or they were delayed because it was simply because the person was on vacation, or he was sick, et cetera. Or there might be some TPAs that just don't respond in a timely manner.
Yeah. And there you have a crew that now you got to send them home. You can't pour, or if you pour, you jeopardize having to do the job over again because it wasn't inspected. So I think that's one of the issues. So folks are saying, why do we only have to use this one person? And if you look at, there's license through the state to understand this code book to do these inspections. It's the same model as if you look at your car inspections. We have inspection stations across the state that are all certified through the state to do your car inspection. If you take your car into that inspection service center and you get it done, it's licensed and you can drive on the state.
And the assumption is that if they're certified, that they are obeying the standards they're supposed to enforce. Now, whether or not that in reality is true, that's another story, but they're held to a standard they're supposed to be inspecting those cars to. And I think the thing we were talking about earlier is, can you imagine in a municipality if the municipality was able to say, well, you only have to go to this car dealership for your inspections? Can you imagine how havoc that would create?
Yeah.
This is kind of a similar type scenario here.
If you say if you live here and you're in your township or your municipality said you can only use XYZ garage, and you say, well, look, I don't want to use XYZ garage. I can't get an appointment there for a month. Every time I go there, they overcharge me. They tell me things that I need to do to my vehicle that I don't need. They said, well, that's too bad. You have to abide by that, or you can't get your car inspected. So, that's the same. Those are the same standards. And obviously, vehicle safety and what we rely on there is
well, they're required by the law to uphold those safety standards.
And they're going to and they do a good job. Obviously, we. So I guess we're looking at the same model, applying it to the UCC code, where we don't have people that are locked in to have to deal with one particular company or individual. Sometimes, obviously, it's human nature. You could have conflicts, personal differences with that individual. You may have had an appeal on a previous project, and then you have that UCC inspector for the next project, and if there's a potential to hold a grudge, but there's obviously a conflict of interest, and I feel the language that we're looking to change would be, instead of one or more, there would have to be 2 or more. So providing some, to break up the monopoly and provide for 2 or more options so people have a choice. And choice is always better. Nobody just wants to go to McDonald's. They like the fact that there's a Burger King or a Wendy's.
I don't think any homeowner out there is going to argue. Why would anybody want just one? I think most homeowners in your district and across the state, they would welcome the opportunity to have 2 or more, at least just be able to, shop around and get better service.
But yet when we talked about this bill and we approached some of the organizations, those local government agencies, they seem to be very much opposed to providing their constituents with a choice. I guess they like the monopoly, they like having that power. I mean, really, if you look at it, the UCC inspector has more authority than any local government or any state government in the fact that they are the only ones that can deny you the right to an occupancy permit or to build
on your property.
And really,
a property you own.
Even if you go through the codes and you can prove that they're wrong, in order to appeal that, you go to a board that's appointed by the same people that appointed the UCC inspector. But it could cost you $500 to $1,000 to tens of thousands of dollars to appeal this, or you just pay the additional inspections, or abide by what may not be the right or the wrong code.
If you disagree, suppose that let's talk about a residential home, and we'll talk about the International Residential Code. If you just have a disagreement with the inspector about the interpretation of the requirements of this code, the only right you have under current law is to go to the local UCC Board of Appeal.
If there is one.
And if you want to spend $500 to do that, because it's generally about what it costs, and if they back up the building code inspector, you really have nowhere to go. You're at their whim right now. And
even if you have your own legal staff and your own UCC inspectors that are licensed by the state that say it's wrong, you still have no recourse. And I think that's the problem that we're seeing, and that's the problem that really needs to be addressed. I mean, this is the United States of America. This is Pennsylvania. We were signers of the Declaration of Independence, but yet we're subjecting our commercial and residential and home builders to a monopoly, and if you question and you appeal, for example, if you're a contractor and you appeal and now you have to do another project in that same municipality dealing with that same UCC inspector, the threat of retribution is there, and you really have no recourse if that does happen. So that's why putting forth this legislation, I think this is definitely, I have yet to talk to one constituent that hasn't supported some kind of choice in these issues.
And what you're proposing is not something radical, because it already exists in the state. In fact, I think Fayette County has the ability for somebody to apply for a construction permit, and then they're able to choose the inspection. There's, I think, 7 or 8 inspection agencies on their list that they can choose from.
And it
already exists.
And I have represented in the 122nd district examples of municipalities that do provide 2 or more, and I really don't have any complaints coming to my office from anybody that's really doing projects in those areas. Nope. And they're all somebody had mentioned to me, one of the local government agencies, well, if you allow for multiple choices, that you're somehow going to get a lower standard. And I think it's very important to note that all the UCC inspectors are licensed by the state, and they're also liable civilly. I mean, if they don't inspect the property and do it properly, they're liable by civil penalty. And it really comes back to them, because they're the ones signing the document.
If the building falls down, they
isn't going to lessen. We're not lessening the codes at all. All we're doing is giving people those options.
It's like a car inspection.
Yeah, we had an example of a business that was looking to come in. A very reputable builder was coming in to do a project in a municipality, and a certain UCC inspector that operated there kind of held up the project and this was numerous projects by the same owner in commercial development, and all the folks were asking for, the builders and the owners, was to say, we are abiding by the rules. We just want somebody who we don't have a personal who doesn't have a personal grievance against us, but yet they don't have that option.
Well, these complaints that you're hearing have occurred statewide since, a few years after the code went into effect, and it's been an issue. You're latching on to a really good issue that's been across the state. Now, there are 8 areas of the state where the municipalities are happy with their third-party administrator, so we're not saying that all third-party administrators are bad. It's just you have nothing to lose by requiring competition.
Well, and on that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll return in just a moment.
Did you know that the chamber of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives contains a painting depicting the 24 hours of the day? Located in the center of the ceiling, the mural, titled The Hours, was created by artist Edwin Austin Abbey. This wonderful masterpiece charts the setting of the sun, moon, and the many stars that grace the heavens. 24 maidens, who each represent an hour of the day, begin each day in light and gladness and ends in solemn drapery carried on still shoulders. Now you know. Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Today we're discussing the Uniform Construction Code with my guest, Bruce Hanson. Bruce?
Thank you.
And before the break, we were speaking a little bit about competition and what that could bring to the table. And I think it's important to note that the majority of our third-party inspectors are doing a very good job. And the complaints that I get, or that my colleagues have gotten to our offices, have been very few and far between. However, I don't think it's fair to subject anybody to that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the majority of the code inspectors are certified. They're honorable people, but like with any profession, you may have some bad actors out there, and that's the problem. It's a minority of the situations probably, but if a person's subject to that bad actor, there's not much they can do under current law if they're one of these monopoly situations.
Yeah. And I think that for the most part, many of your UCC, and I've talked to some UCC inspectors who would welcome the opportunity to be able to compete. I mean, they're locked into where they can compete, or they're blocked out of areas where they can't compete with their services and their pricing, which could be more competitive. So I think a lot of the folks would open it up. Now, this bill takes a small step of just saying 2 or more, but I think one of the concerns that we heard from some of the very rural parts of the state, from those municipalities, and the statements that they said were that because they have such a small rural community, it's such a large area, very few construction projects, that they're not going to be able to find 1 or more or 2 or more to service their needs. And we wrote into this legislation, if you could maybe explain a little bit what we put into
the issue is that if you're a municipality in the northern tier, there just may not be code agencies that are willing to go up there and enforce the code. So for a municipality to get two or more code third-party inspectors might be difficult. So your bill takes that into account and allows that municipality, if they can't absolutely find two qualified third-party agencies, they could apply to the department for a waiver, Department of Labor and Industry.
Yeah.
So you take that into account.
And I think that's, I mean, really looking at this bill as being just opening up the competition a little bit, letting the folks that are out there doing these projects, that are making the investment, to have a little bit of option in who they choose to responsibly do those inspections. Another thing that we talked a little bit about in the bill as we went through the process, and we're looking forward to hopefully hearings coming up with the Labor and Industry Committee coming up later this year to fully discuss and vet the bill. One of the things that we talked about was the contracts. A lot of times these third-party agencies are already been contracted, and
Correct.
you know how would the bill would address that?
Well, basically, the way your bill works would be that if there's an existing contract, this two or more requirement would simply take effect after that contract expires. There is a constitutional problem in Pennsylvania if you try to abrogate an existing contract.
Yeah.
So your legislation takes that into account, and say that somebody just signed a 3-year contract, or a third-party agency just signed a three-year contract, your requirement of your bill would take effect 3 years basically for that municipality, 3 years down the road. But eventually it would kick in. So.
And I think that's you know, important, and as we move forward with the hearings that we're going to have scheduled with the committee later later this year, I really look forward to continuing to vet this. Obviously, it's a very important issue as we look at our economy, which is trying to rebound, and we have those folks that want to make those investments in the community. They want to do things right, but yet are being delayed because they can't find a reasonable you know, third-party inspector to come in and do timely inspections and not come back to
at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, at a reasonable cost to them. And also, I think it's important to note that, you know, third-party inspectors have a responsibility to the municipalities, whether they be one or more or two or more, to obviously turn over those records and make sure that they're meeting the compliance of the statute.
I think one of the things that we've discussed, and we'll bring it up in the hearings, is the fee schedule for these inspectors is based on square footage. So it's not the time they put in. If they're building a giant warehouse and that warehouse is 100,000 square feet, their fee schedule is based on like 33 cents per square foot. I'm just pulling that number out. I think the concept that you're talking about exploring is the hourly, maybe looking at, you know, the person charging the property owner for their actual time they worked, you know, by the hour or whatever. So that's another concept we're going to be looking at.
And I think a lot of that comes back to competition. I mean, trying to legislate or put in statute all the fixes that would be required to just say make it comparable and protect the individual in the process, the person who's paying the bill or being mandated to pay these fees. To legislate all that would be very difficult when we have a system that if we opened it up with a little bit of competition would mitigate 90% if not more of those issues. And as we continue to work to tweak this legislation to make it more applicable for our society today.
And again, your legislation doesn't propose anything that isn't being done now. And in fact, we were talking about the opt-in municipalities, the 90% of municipalities that opted in. Well, there's the other 10% that didn't. So in those areas of the state, basically rural areas, the Department of Labor and Industry enforces the building code on commercial buildings. But if you're building a home in those areas, you can go to anybody you want. You can go to any certified code official you want to do the inspections and the final occupancy permit inspection. So what you're proposing here already exists in many parts of the state.
Yeah, and what this would do is really take that this is mandate relief for the individuals, and mandate relief from having to be mandated to use that one third-party inspector to pay whatever fees that one third-party inspector, and to mandate it to wait for that one third-party inspector to come out and provide those services. So I think that's important. And anytime when we can interject competition into the free market system, we've seen that it has really been helpful to the economy. And as we still struggle in many of our rural areas, this would be something that could really assist and get these projects moving in a much more timely manner.
This is a pro property owner, homeowner legislation and proposal because it only will benefit homeowners. Again, they will have a choice. They will not be subject to a monopoly. The fee schedules, if there's competition, will tend to be probably lower. So it'll make these inspections less costly to property owners. So.
And as we move forward, I certainly look to talk to all the interest groups and stakeholders from the individuals who have dealt with this monopoly, with these types of monopolies, to those local government agencies and what concerns they may have with this legislation, as well as the engineering firms and those construction UCC code
Certainly.
officers. I think it's important to bring everybody to the table. But at the end of the day, we really wanted to put forth a bill that like you said, is going to be for the individual, because they're the ones that are paying the mandate if these inspections are done multiple times, or if these inspections are not done correct, or if they have to appeal the inspection. That's all a mandate. So if you look at an extra $5,000 in construction costs onto a homeowner, and right now the housing industry is struggling, that's an extra $5,000 that they're putting out just for fees and schedules that may or may not be needed. And then at the same time, if they're mortgaging that $5,000 for 30 years, you're looking at a heck of a mandate on your working class families, and this is that's why this bill is designed to provide some relief.
And you're exactly right about the working class family, because it doesn't just deal with new homes. We're talking about if you put an inflatable pool in your backyard. There's, depending on the height, that inflatable pool could be subject to the UCC, and that's been a common complaint. So property owners out there can be affected in ways that they don't expect by putting in a deck, a new sunroom, et cetera. And if you get an unreasonable code inspector, it could be difficult.
Yeah, you could take that $10,000 remodeling or $10,000 of putting a deck on your house,
Right.
and turn it into a $15,000 project with no extra value in the project except for those unreasonable inspections. So I think that's a good part to bring up, because now if you just a simple remodel, a lot of folks are staying in their homes. A simple remodel, that you then interject this whole system, and then you interject this monopoly into that, and you're looking at
Swimming
driving
pool,
those costs
again,
up.
swimming pool.
Yeah.
And like I said, the inflatable pools can be covered by the building code. And that's a common little thing that homeowners get hit with.
Yeah.
So we want responsible and friendly code inspectors, basically.
Yeah, and we want people that are going to make sure that we want these inspections to be done. Obviously, public safety was why this was put in place. But we also want a system where if somebody calls up, they want to put a deck on their house, and they have a crew together to do it that weekend, they shouldn't have to be waiting another 3 weeks just to have that inspector come out and inspect the
Right.
plans or do a visit, because right now they have that option. And you don't have, you say, well, this person's on vacation, can I call somebody else to come out and do the inspection? And the answer is no, because you can't. And that isn't right. That's not how our system should be working, and that's why we put forth this legislation. Bruce, thank you for your time today. And that's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Doyle Heffley. If you need assistance with any state matter, please feel free to contact me at my local office or through my website. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for a Legislative Report.